Well, hi everybody, and welcome back to episode 3 of Interesting AF or Interesting as Fuck, depending on if you have little kids around you or not. And we are really excited about this episode because I think this is the onus of why we wanted to start this podcast. And really, what we're going to be talking about today is how to connect to anybody. So, how to talk to people in a way that makes you seem interesting, that makes them seem interesting, and it actually has you can have a conversation with anybody that you run into, even though you think you might not have anything in common with that person. And then we're going to be talking about a situation, for example, going to a party alone or going to a party where you don't know many people, and how both Elaine and I kind of deal with those situations. I think we've been the going to a party solo kind of person, and how we still have managed to have fun at those things. Um, so that's kind of what is our episode. I think in the beginning, we don't have any corrections for any of the two last episodes that I know of. But again, we haven't, gotten anything. But as always, those corrections are always open. And here we go. Let's start it off. Elaine, how do you connect with anybody that you meet?
That's a great question. I find I'm an open book. Like I will talk about anything, my stance on anything where appropriate. But when we first started talking about this as our next topic, the first thing that came to mind is my partner finds it very funny that anytime I meet new people or he talks about new people or anyone talks about new people, I want to know where they're from. Um, and he's like, what? And apparently, like, my mom does it, my brother does it. And he's like, it's so funny. Like, your whole family, why do you need to know where people are from? Like, because to me, it's an immediate way to connect with someone. Not even if you're from there, but if you've been there, if you know someone from there, and I'm not necessarily talking about like you went to this massive university and you're like, oh, well, did you know so and so? Like, it's a huge university. They may not have gone the same year, but if you know someone who lives in the small town, or like, it just immediately allows for follow-up questions, right? So I always like to start with, where are you from? It also allows me to kind of like envision where they're from, whether that's like rural, urban, like, not that it matters. To me, it just is a really easy way to connect with people. And us having like lived in and around and worked in the DC area for many years.
Many. We aren't going to age ourselves on this one.
Believe all the number of years that we've worked. The number two question, especially for like younger folks in the city, is what do you do? They want to know like what you do for work. And I have removed that from my line of questioning, because if it comes up later, or if it comes up organically, fine. But I don't know. I typically find like that doesn't tell you much about a person. And oftentimes in the city where we, have been, it's the motivation for it is to find out like, okay, well, how can this person help maneuver me? Or like, is this person worth my time based on what they do? And that's just not the way to connect with people. People see right through that. So to me, it's often, where are you from? Because I think that's interesting. It tells me a lot about a person in terms of like, are you from New England? Okay, cool. Me too. Like, let's bond over that. Like, I don't know. So that to me is always a good go-to, and just
Yeah.
easily relatable.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I am very instinctual, right? So I have this like very weird, I'm not going to use the word weird, but this very interesting habit of having no problem walking up to a bunch of people, just talking to each other and then listen, right? And then I just I'd be like, hi, here by myself, or here, I'm here because I know so and so, I didn't just crash the party. It sounds like very Wedding Crashers, but like I'll listen, right? I'll listen to what people are talking about. and then start kind of mentally kind of not pegging, but mentally understanding where somebody's from. So like if a conversation is about politics, which where we are in DC, usually, 95% of conversations around politics, especially during this year. I think, that you can kind of like start chatting about, or even if you don't, and this is something that I do extremely well. While I'm an open book, people have a very hard time gauging my opinion on things unless I say it writ large, be like, "Hey, this is my opinion." I I think it's always great to know logics of the opinion opposing you, right? So if you are for, let's say, a policy change or a political change, be curious about the other one, the other side of that argument, because then you can have a conversation that doesn't actually allow anybody to understand your opinion if you don't want them to, right? I think I think with very like specific audiences, of course, you kind of chat and talk about what your opinion is. But I think having this kind of listening also approach, like, hey, where are you from? And then like kind of listening as to what the conversation is going, it gives you information because in the end, it's not about you. And I think disassociating the art of conversation with your ego is what makes it, more interesting for people because it becomes not just about them. It becomes about kind of a bigger thing. And I think, and I still haven't taken it out of my vocabulary about what do you do, but I should. But I think that's
Not
such a,
necessarily that you have to, but in DC,
yeah,
it's like the second question, like behind what's your name,
it,
right? So I've at
but
least,
that's what I
not that I ever
mean.
moved down.
Yeah, no, but I think it's great. I think it's beyond. It creates. I think it creates more of a connection, right? It creates more of a connection to that person to not reduce them to their position, right? Because obviously we're in DC, and that's kind of how the MO is of most people. But I think we have this kind of movement, among younger people, among the Gen Zers of the people, to not reduce ourselves just to what we do from 9 to 5, right? Or whatever hours you
Absolutely.
have now. So I think that's I took a note. See, you learn something new every day. You really need to move on. But like my major like one thing is the first thing I do is I listen. I go in, um, and I think, if it's one on one, then obviously it's different. But if it's like a situation where there's a lot of people, it's a lot easier to like, and a lot less pressure, right? You don't need to talk. You can introduce yourself, say, I'll bleep that out.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Linda. Um, and, kind of practice kind of a little bit and then move forward. That's kind of what I do at the beginning.
That's so good. And that's something I need to work on because I think I don't think you were on maternity leave yet when we did the Discovery Insights.
I
But
wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't yet.
like straight up yellow. So I'm like a golden retriever, like, right? Like I see a group of people, I want to go over, I want to be a part of every piece of the conversation. I want to keep the conversation going. And so sometimes my dad has always been this like litany of like one line, like life lessons. And one of them has always been be interested, not interesting. And I know that like it's something that plays in my head all the time, and I still need to get better at it because I'm just like, I get so excited about so many different topics. Like, I'm the type of person that has to, like, if I hear there's like a whole list of things where it's like, if you want to talk about sharks, if you want to talk about wine, if you're talking about true crime, if you're talking about like name 100 different things,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I know about that. I want to talk with someone about that, and I have a hard
Mm.
time like stopping myself if there's something that's or like they're from where I'm from, or they're from a place that I visited that I really love. It's hard for me to like kind of like not be so excited about it. So that's something I know I continue to work on even in my bleep age.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not like this, and it's not easy because again, I'm yellow as well, but I'm not, I think I'm less yellow than you. Like I think you were like
I was
hella yellow. You're like
I was like, no,
94%.
it's crazy.
Um, and I think for me, it's the voice in my head. It's like my dad's the voice in my head was like, shut up, like stop talking. Like my dad, like you're like be interested. It's my dad's like, stop it, stop, listen to what people are trying to say. So I think that's kind of what happens. Like if it was me, like I would be just like exactly like it's exactly the thing that I've been like trying to work on as well to like just and that it's taken me a while to just
Yeah.
but something that you mentioned about about all the things that you're interested in, right? And I think it's when you go to a party, it's or like go to any situation where it's you're becoming kind of a synopsis of yourself, right? So just remember ahead of time, be like, hey, this is a party that's going to be just fun. So I'm going to talk about if you have any hobbies. If you don't have any hobbies, that's okay too. There's something that interests you. There's a book that you read, there's a movie that you saw, there's a podcast that you listened to, there's a walk that you went to. I think the mundane of our everyday lives is also interesting. And I think we let silence kind of differ on that. And I think when you know what you're interested in and then you learn the medium as to which you kind of receive that information the best. Like for example, I love reading books. Like it's my reading is my main source of like pulling out information. Like not a big audio person, not a big podcast person, which is ironic. I'll be listening to this one though, so just everybody. Um, but I think when you learn the medium as to which you process information and kind of intake it, it becomes so much easier to talk about it, right? So, I think that's kind of one of the things also is how you translate those hobbies into conversations and how you connect it to the conversation at hand.
Yeah, and I think your thing about listening, right? Especially if you're kind of there on your own, or whether this is like a social event, a work event, you're just traveling solo and you happen to be sitting at the bar by yourself or whatever. Um, is just like sitting and listening, and then you know having those things in your back pocket where if it comes up, then you can like interject. Sounds really aggressive, but you can start kind of easing your way into the conversation, right? Like you know sometimes you just kind of walk up into a circle where they're kind of already mid conversation, um and you haven't yet had the opportunity to introduce yourself. Like not being afraid to chime in where appropriate, I think, is huge, right? Or if the conversation is kind of at a lull, like saying, hi, how are you doing? I'm so and so. And just kind of starting from there. I know that can be like very anxiety inducing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, but, worst comes to worst is the conversation's not going anywhere. And you say it was nice to meet you all and you move on.
Yeah.
Because it's just a lot I have found it's a lot better, and I feel better leaving that event, having done some of that, than just like awkwardly standing in a corner, which to me is harder to do than if I were to just go stand with a bunch of strangers and maybe become part of this conversation, or maybe just like taking up space. Yes.
Yeah, no. And for the record, me walking up to a bunch of people that I didn't know was how I met my husband. So we'll just
Oh,
and so I think there are, if you're looking for friends, if you're looking for partners, if you're looking for a lot of things, you don't know how these conversations can like evolve and change the course of your life, right? So And I think the key is, I think as well, is to think about not giving a shit about what
Yeah.
these people think, which is which is
Just,
contradictory in a way. Of
but,
course, it's so hard.
but 9.5 times out of 10, they're worrying the same thing about themselves. And so just kind of realizing like everyone is in their own head about it and you could just let that shit go. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I need to practice what I preach a whole bunch too. But you brought up a great example, probably the best example, right, of you meeting your husband in a situation like that. The one that pops into my mind is I was on work travel in Savannah, Georgia. I was at this great hotel. I had a great but like very long and exhausting day. So I went up to this fantastic rooftop bar that it had. And I just grabbed a drink and I sat down at this couch, and these two other women were like sitting kind of like catty corner to me. Oh, no, sorry. That's not even where it started. That's where the night ended. Clearly had more than
Oh,
one drink. I had taken, I love taking myself out on self dates. So, like, I have
ditto.
no problem going to the movies by myself, taking myself out to dinner, any of that stuff. So
Preach.
I'm on work travel, right? I'm on work travel, and I'd never been to Savannah. So I'm like, I know there's great restaurants here. I'm going to go. And I'm going to totally put this out there. This place called The Gray. Holy shit.
I've
So good.
heard about the gray.
Absolutely fantastic. It's called The Gray because it's in an old Greyhound bus station in the middle of Savannah. So, I mean, the look of it,
Okay.
it's like it's beautiful. And if I'm not mistaken, is a minority owned business as
Ooh.
chef. I don't quote me on that yet, but I'm pretty sure that's the
And
case. So,
we'll
like another fantastic check of the box.
and we'll
Um,
tag them. We'll put them in
yeah,
the description as well. So
not recommend this restaurant enough. So anyway, I'm there by myself. I'm enjoying this dinner, and these two women about our age sit next to me, and they are just like giggling and having the best time. And like one of them said something so funny that like I started laughing, and so I just instead of making potentially awkward scenario, I just turned and I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to be eavesdropping, but these tables are like right on top of each other. But like, that was hilarious. And you ladies look like you're having a fantastic time and you just look super fun. So thank you for the laugh. And we literally ended up spending like the rest of the night hanging out. Like, we all had dessert together. And then it turns out we're all staying in the same hotel. So that's when we went up to the rooftop bar. And like one of the women in particular, I still keep in touch with, and
aw.
I know she's trying to build an online presence, so I'll check with her. But like we can tag her as well after I kind of get
Ooh.
to mention her name and all that. But like her and I like randomly talked on the phone for an hour about a month or two ago, just because like we kind of thrive off each other's energy. And like, so she's someone I like keep in touch with seldomly. We don't live in the same state, but like, those are the types of scenarios where like you're saying, you might meet someone who makes an impact on you, or you may never see those people again. And that's perfectly fine too. Or maybe you need an impact on those people and they take that with them.
Exactly. And I love your this is a great thing, an example of, hey, you laughed. It could have been potentially awkward, but you know what? You just explained. And I never, it's always great to explain. You don't need to go into these like, in your head things. Be like, you know what? I laughed because it was funny. You look like you're having fun. Thanks for the laugh. And then it could have just like ended there if they hadn't they'd been like, yeah. And if they were mean about it, it's on them, right? You weren't. And I just love that. Because that happens in parties all the time where you laugh at the wrong thing or you say a joke. So so something I do is that I constantly try to make jokes. And it's either 50% it bombs or 50% I get a laugh. And so I explain it. I'll be like, hey, that was meant to be a joke and it bombed. And I'm sorry. I'm always trying to be funny. And people usually laugh at that, right? They go, oh, she's trying. And so that is also another good piece of advice. One is where are you from is such a great, just opening line because everybody wants to talk about their roots, right? So everybody at some point wants to. Two, listen. Three, explain, kind of be curious and be okay with explaining, if you did something awkward or you did something weird. Just because the two of us are interesting as fuck doesn't mean we're not awkward as fuck as well.
A fucking man to that.
Oh my God, so awkward. Anyway, so like, I just,
Maybe we'll do an episode of like awkward moments that we've had where
oh,
we've been
yo,
like
oh my God.
silly or stupid.
That's okay because my anxiety keeps me awake. So those come up all the time. So I got them on replay. So that's the thing. I think people that see interesting people, people that feel they're not interesting, think that people like us are just constantly just like making people laugh and like talking to everybody. And you're like, we bomb half of the time, most likely. Or that's even generous. I feel like half of the time is even
You,
generous.
you are a living, breathing specimen on this fucking spinny little blue ball. You're interesting. Like you're breathing, you're interesting. That's
Yes.
the beginning, middle, and end of it. Everyone has a story. And sometimes some are more uplifting, sometimes some are sad, but any which way they are, they're interesting. And so
And
you
they're
get to
yours.
decide. Exactly. And you get to decide, you're in control of when you tell that story, how you tell that story. Like Linda's talking about making jokes. She's one of the most self-deprecating people I know, which is why we get along because I am too. And like that's how we decide to tell parts of our story, right? Is through humor. And yeah, I think you're in control of it. And it's impossible to not be somewhat interesting.
And
You're
even if you And even if you're
interesting.
not, and even if you feel you're not, right? You like something. There is one thing on this world, in this world. Like me and Elaine have this thing where we just like different things. And I think that's like part of our personality, right? Like yellows, if you do this thing insights, yellows tend to be interested in a lot of different things. Other people are interested in one thing and know it backwards, frontwards, sideways, front ways, whichever. And that's the thing that you talk about. That's the thing. And even within that thing, there are different aspects that you know a lot about. But I think, just and to your point, Elaine, it's not selling yourself short. I think it comes back and everything comes back to this. It's about confidence, right? Understanding yourself is confidence. Going, I am really good at XYZ, or I'm really good at X, or I'm really good at like this tiny little thing. I'm really good at gaming. I'm really good at editing videos. I'm really good at PowerPoint. I'm really good at making a paella, whatever. Like, whatever it is, that is when you know that, and when you know that about yourself, I think that's what comes out as interesting. And I think Elaine and I have this thing where both of us know that we are very self-aware people. And I think, that's another piece of like kind of knowledge is self-awareness also breeds in like interest, and it breeds interest in people kind of gravitating towards you and kind of understanding how you do that as well, how they can be self-aware.
And some of that has come with age, right? Like I had lunch this week with a friend of mine from high school who I haven't seen in probably over 15 years. It was it was literally the highlight of my week. But we were walking down the street and it was so funny. And we kind of turned to each other and we were like, how old were you when the level of fucks you gave drastically fell? So I think mine was about 32 when it truly went to zero. So if you're not there yet, you got time. Like self awareness and kind of, right, we say, let that shit go. Don't care about what other people think of you. Like that's a lot easier to say than do.
Of course.
But I promise you, it will get there. And like we're constantly changing as people, so it's okay if that like self-understanding takes a couple of revamps, right? Because things happen, but like it'll get there. And I think the earlier you kind of like commit to really knowing who you are and like what makes you happy and the things that you are interested in and how you want to and how you are comfortable approaching others, the easier all of this gets.
Yeah, and honestly, I think my thing has always been, and I'll say this because I think there's a distinction between like giving zero fucks, because I tend to give zero fucks, and I've always tend to give zero fucks, but I'm always aware of what people think of me. That doesn't mean I let it affect me, but it's always like we can't say having zero fucks is great, because that allows you to make yourself the center of your own universe. I was reading this week with the Olympics. What was it? Main character energy. Is that the term? So like you're the
Yeah,
main character in your own life. All these other fuckers, the
I
side
love it.
stories. And make yourself the main character. It's like that movie The Holiday, right? Like you're acting like the
Oh,
best friend when you're the leading lady. God, I still can't believe that guy was fake. Like that hurt me so bad. Yeah, he
Arthur,
wasn't like, yeah, Arthur wasn't behind, like it wasn't based on a writer. I was so pissed off when I found that.
he's a scrutily do.
He's a scream.
Such
Such a
love
good
that
movie.
movie.
My favorite
Also,
scene. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'll also specify before we get back to that, like it's also not about giving zero fucks. It's about knowing what you prioritize that you give fucks about. It's
Yeah,
your priority list. Like, there are plenty of things I give fucks about, but there are the things that we think we need to give a fuck about that I have
yeah.
zero fucks about.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, but I think the distinction is giving fucks about what people think about you, right? Like, I think, yeah, I think people tend to put people in categories for a lot of reasons because it's easier. It's literally how our brain is wired. Our brain is wired to put people in categories. It's one of the reasons why our brains are inherently racist, because literally the way our brain operates is we need to put things in categories. And so our brain kind of goes, oh, I'm going to take this stereotype or this racist kind of comment and think it like creates categories in my brain. And you literally
Interesting.
have to rewire your brain to go,
Yeah.
I need to understand that this is a whole more like a different picture than it is, because our brain is lazy. Our brain wants to
Yeah.
do the least amount of work as possible.
It's totally true. We just had like a team meeting where we talked about, I wish I could remember the terms, but it's basically like our brain is wired to do fight or flight. So we constantly go to the negative. Oh, above the line, below the line.
Oh,
And our
yes,
brain
yes,
is
yes.
wired and we have to do the work to get above the line. Um, but another thing, if this is the point I was actually going to make, if you are in, even if you're not in the workforce yet, and you can find some type of unconscious bias training, that was eye opening to me. And not because I had a whole bunch of these unconscious biases, but like it helped me understand kind of like what you just brought up, Linda, like how people's brains work and how hard we have to work to get around those. I thought that was one of the more interesting, like required corporate trainings that we've had.
Yeah,
But like it was truly eye opening. So I can't recommend those enough if your company or if you just find some free ones online or whatever. If I don't know if like Masterclass does stuff like that, but if you can find an unconscious bias training, I can't recommend those enough.
I agree. I think it's literally why kind of racist tropes kind of come back over and over throughout history. One of the
Yeah,
things, I don't know why we're down this tangent, but we are, I guess. Um, we literally want to peg people in situations. So know that people's are automatically putting you as the loud one or as the weird one or as the silent one or as whichever. And it's
short
or
one
the
or the
or the
yeah.
tall one or the short one or the exotic looking one, or whatever, or the thin one or the fat one or whatever. It's kind of what we our brains want to categorize. They want to put things in neat little boxes and
Descriptors.
and descriptors, and know that you're not that. It's not because somebody else says that you are that. You are beyond that. And I think one of the things that helps us out a lot is being interesting, because people literally cannot put you in a category. Once you get beyond this like kind of above kind of descriptor line, people go, oh, and you help them be themselves much more than you think. And I think that radiates confidence. And I think that's how you kind of are in a party and become, you just tap into that, like Elaine had said, like, you are interesting. We are all interesting by nature. We all have stories. We all have something to say. And you sit there and you talk about it, and people like, they just get there. They just want to hear it, and they just want to do it. And I think that's always a plus. That know that people are in the same situation as you, and you talking just gets people out of their shell and gets people to think beyond these types of descriptors that we want to kind of put everybody in.
Yeah. So hopefully that's, that helps you build some confidence, or, you know, just maybe start thinking about the next time you're in a crowded room where you don't know anybody, just kind of how to, we're not saying like sidle up to people like unbeknownst to them, right?
Like I do. Don't do what I do. Don't freak people out and be like, "Hey, I'm Linda. I am going to talk to you about whatever you're talking about."
All I can think about is Seinfeld, which is literally will forever be my favorite show in the history of television. It's probably, I know, like, it doesn't stand the test of time, even just with some of the references and or like things like floppy disks and payphones, whatever. But yeah, all I can think of is the Seidler, where like Elaine, the inspiration for my name, makes him carry around Tic Tacs so I can hear him coming. Like, no sidling, like no full blown sidling.
I'll start carrying Tic Tacs.
Right? Make eye contact with somebody.
Yeah, I don't know. I posted this week where, self-awareness is knowing what trait as a girlfriend would have a Seinfeld episode. Like, they would talk about Seinfeld, and mine would definitely be that I talk too much. Like, there's no way that mine isn't.
Mine too.
Yeah, that's okay.
But that's why we're doing a podcast. We can get it all out here.
Exactly. And, and not bother our families with our incessant yapping. We'll still bother them with our incessant yapping. That's fine.
Of course.
They're used to it.
So yeah, I'm happy to talk about our next episode.
Yeah. And we, as always, if you have situational questions, feel free to email us, feel free to call, if you want to ask a question, or if you want to like have a situation where we want to chat about it here, feel free to message us anytime. And yeah, now we can kind of tell you what's up for the next episode. So this one was how to connect to anybody. I'll put those kind of big numbers out there of what we talked about. So just real quick, it's, asking people where they're from, listening, having the confidence to understand kind of what you are interested in, what you want to talk about, and really kind of self-awareness around knowing that. And I'm going to add number 5, is give 0 fucks about what people think about you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so our next main topic will be entering a conversation. The next one will be how to get yourself the fuck out of one. Because as fun and or challenging as it can be to enter one, sometimes like Homer Simpson backing yourself out through the bushes ain't the best way to go. And so sometimes exiting a conversation can be really hard. Before we started recording, I was telling Linda that like one of my hardest things is like leaving a party. Like, I'm half Italian, so I need to spend at least 30 minutes before we want to leave planning to say goodbye to people. So we'll talk about that on the next one. And then Linda, if you want to talk about our actual next episode for our next, the doc is in, which I'm very excited about.
So the next doc is in is next. So next episode, we will be talking about the imposter. um, which is, spoiler alert, dark, is about this big story that happened a couple of years ago. I mean, is it a spoiler to say, kind of the main
No,
thing? I don't.
the
It's in.
synopsis I think is because it won't take any shock factor away
Okay,
from
yeah. So, The Imposter is 2012 documentary film about a French imposter, really. His name was Frédéric Bourdin, who pretended to be Nicholas Patrick Barclay, an American who had disappeared in Texas at the age of 13 in 1994. So this is pretty dark, obviously, because it has a lot of triggering themes, disappearances,
we'll always
emotion.
give we'll always give like a tag and a warning as to like the theme if
Exactly.
it's dark, if it tackles some tough issues so that people know ahead of time before they go in, and we're telling everyone to watch it and we're like, we're going to put you in this super dark place, so we'll
It's
always give
super
like a trigger
dark.
warning.
Yes, because if as Elaine knows, she always has to tell me if I can watch something or not because I'm an extreme wuss when it comes to these types of things, and I only watch like
Not
Disney. No, it's okay. I'm a Disney person or a comedy person, and Elaine always has to like approve things for me to watch. Um,
this ain't either of those. This ain't
yeah,
those.
yeah. And so so it's on globally, it's on I believe it's on Prime. And then in the US, I don't know if it's somewhere else.
Peacock.
Peacock, right?
Peacock has it. Tubi, which is a free platform. There's typically ads, but Tubi, their whole business model is will forever be free. But Peacock and Amazon Prime,
Yep,
I believe, are the two like big ones. And then of course you can always rent it or buy it from Apple TV, and other places like that. So, but Peacock and
exactly.
Amazon Prime.
And we'll put the links so you watch it ahead of time, and so you can click on it and kind of watch it for the next time. And yeah, I'll be watching it myself. So Elaine knows it well, but I'll be watching it. I've heard of this one. I think I watched a little bit of it, but I'm gonna remind myself, kind of refresh. Yeah, so really excited. So please join us. And thank you all for joining us on Interesting as Fuck. And yeah, thank you as always, Elaine.
Yes, and I was trying to look up our Instagram handle because it
I
has escaped me.
It's interesting.
That we
It's
can,
interesting. AF ladies.
okay,
We
so
should
yeah,
probably mention that.
we should we can
We're
start putting
doing
that in.
we're doing
Oh,
great, sweetie.
we're killing it. Absolutely killing it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks
Awesome.
for joining us.
Thank you. And we will chat with you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. There we go. Yes.